In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. Tonight is episode 73, and we are going to talk about a Vin Diesel with hair movie called Find Me Guilty. And this is a recommendation, I think, was it one of yours, Robert, or was it the Don't Waste Your Hate Boys?
No, this is me. I'm responsible for this one.
All right, very good. Well, we have been talking about it with the Don't Waste Your Hate guys, and so I think we're going to have them on Tuesday night for a YouTube live stream that we affectionately call Boys Night Out. So that'll be 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern this upcoming Tuesday, so check it out. Do chime in the comments area. We'll try to respond in the comments, and we'll have a good time. We'll have those boys on for an hour or two talking about this movie and this very episode that we're about to do, that you can find the show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/73. So that's the exciting news coming up for that. Doing a dual episode type format these days where we have the Actual Anarchy version and then we have the Last Nighters version. The main film analysis is the same. We have a little bit of extra content at the beginning and the end that is the Actual Anarchy stuff, and that is now in the 73rd episode. And the Last Nighters, which we launched at the beginning of the year, with episode 1 being our Get Out episode, which was 58 of the Actual Anarchy podcast. We've kind of done this tree branch where we have this Last Nighters that is a normie-friendly version, so we don't explicitly call it or refer to anarchy in the name of the show, the name of the website, any of the descriptions of content, things like that, in the hopes that there is a bit more of an appeal to it, a little bit less off-putting. If people have the wrong idea of what anarchy is, they're not going to just immediately turn off to the content on the name alone. So that's kind of the plan with Last Nighters, and that's why we have the split in the names and also in the numbering format. So this is episode 73 and 16. It's very confusing. It's the new math. It's fucking Common Core math. Right, Robert?
I don't know. Probably, yeah.
So what else can I tell you guys? We're not doing video lately, but we will do it for the Libertarian Union talk show, State of the Libertarian Union talk show, and also for the Boys Night Out. So you can see my long, flowing, glowing locks. I'm growing my hair out. It's not pretty right now. It's sort of in that in-between phase where it looks all puffy and gross. So hopefully I can power through that and not really,
What's that?
I was telling the audience of our Patreon supporting class that I'm growing my hair out, and I'm trying to get through the really difficult stage of where it just looks awful.
You're growing it out for what purpose? I mean, you turning into like Mr. Hippie guy or what? What's your ideal length?
I don't even know. It's just one of those things that I haven't really ever had an opportunity to do in the last 20 years, and I'm not getting any younger, so it's now or never.
Here's your chance. Time to grow my hair out.
Gotta take
I'm
my
going
chance.
for it, guys. You're some kind of hero, Daniel.
That's
Do
right.
it, man. I need a hero. Yeah, buddy. Do it.
So anyway,
You stopped going down to town? Your monthly meetings?
Oh yeah. I haven't had to go down for a meeting in a while, though there might be a meeting in Minneapolis at the end of next month, and we're trying to figure out if I'm going to go, and if I do, if the family's going to come with me or not.
Oh, yeah. What's up?
Yeah. There was a meeting there last month, and I skipped out on it because who wants to go to Minneapolis in March? I think they still have snow on the ground right now.
Not even people who live in Minneapolis want to go there in March.
Right. But we do have some extended family on my wife's side over there, like older folks who probably won't be around for a whole lot longer, and they have never met our kids, but they send them cards all the time, and we send pictures and whatnot. So it's like, okay, well, if we want to have an opportunity to meet these people before it's too late, we better do it relatively soon. And March is not a good time to go, but if there's a thing at the end of May, that's probably like the best time to go to a place like that, I would think, because I know that July and August, it's fucking muggy and hot there. I don't want to be in that. So I think late spring or mid to late spring and late summer, early fall, probably good times to go. Late September.
Are you transitioning?
October.
Are you transitioning right now? Is that what you're doing?
Into what? An old
whatever.
man?
I don't know. I mean, no, there's like a million different genders. I don't know. I'm not going to try and assume your gender, but it sounds like you're transitioning into some sort of feminine creature. I don't know. Deal with it, you pussy.
No, I just don't want to be in a overly hot and muggy situation or traveling when it's fucking cold and dangerous and icy and shitty.
Listen, I don't want to deal when it's like super cold, and I don't want to get there and it's like hot and muggy. Oh my God, I just don't want to have to deal with that.
No. I'm strategically planning when is the best time to be where.
Yeah, I think both of us are correct.
It's cool and calculated. It's not emotional.
Sure.
What else can I talk about? We've got the Patreon. Several ways to get there. Patreon.com/ReadRothbard, ReadRothbard.com/Patreon, or ActualAnarchy.com/Patreon. We've got the Libertarian Union. We're going to be doing the monthly State of the Libertarian Union talk show the last Sunday of the month, which will be April 30th, I believe. Not sure exactly how many participants we will have, but generally speaking, out of the dozen or so shows, we get 4 or 6, between 4 and 6, generally speaking, having a conversation that goes about an hour to 2 hours on some chosen topic, or we try to stay on, one thing or another, and we cover whatever's clever. Not sure what we're going to do this month around, but we also do some updates on our various shows, what things we're trying, what has been introduced, anything exciting that's happened lately. Hopefully we'll have Stephen Clyde of the Peace and Liberty podcast on this time. He is so you can find his show at forpeaceandliberty.com. I think he's up to episode 36 or something like that. He's busting out an episode every weekday. So he's a madman. It's crazy, but he's doing really well. We're very excited for him, and hopefully he can join us for next Sunday. So you've got your brief notes. Does that mean that the notes are sparse and minimal?
Oh, I've got super minimal notes. I mean, I've seen the movie now twice, and I wrote just two notes. But there are all kinds of other things to discuss in terms of, I mean, they were found not guilty, but they're clearly the mafia. So that's always fun. We can divulge into that. Did they actually, get to the juries? Is there jury tampering, or did they really find them not guilty? Was the case of the government that flimsy for it being that long, nearly 2 years long? Or was it really just, a whole lot of circumstantial bullshit that governments like to use against normal people, and hopefully that they'll cop to some, reduced plea, they'll plea bargain down to some other, lesser charge, and then, there's a successful conviction for this prosecutor, and isn't his career great? And he's shooting up and doing well, and then it's also more excuses for the prison industrial complex to look at all these prisoners we have to take care of, so we need to tax more money and get more funds for that. And then you get the cops, they get to point to the huge crime rate. It's just everybody wins except for the people when these things happen.
What else is going on, Robert, before we get into the last nighters version of the show?
I don't know, man. What's happening? What's going down? No, just a bunch of personal stuff. I don't know why I want to share that on the podcast, so let's just get into it.
All right, good enough for me. So, initiating normie mode. Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Robert of the Last Nighters, lastnighters.com. We're going to be talking about Find Me Guilty. It's a movie starring Vin Diesel, and he has hair in this one, so you might not recognize him, but you'll definitely pick up on his voice. And this is episode 16 of the show, so you can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/16. And let's say hello to Robert before we get into the Google description and start talking about this movie. How you doing, sir?
What's up, everybody? Robert here. I'm going to talk about Find Me Guilty. This is a recommendation of mine. I saw this movie and said, yeah, we should probably do this one. This one's got a lot of strong themes in it. And it's also it's like an overlooked, I don't know if it's necessarily a gem, that this is like a great movie that people need to see. But it's a strong movie, I thought, for this show. And, completely overlooked, especially at the box office. I think it made like $1. So
maybe $1.50.
Yeah, maybe $1.50. Not nowhere near like the Fast and the Furious movies, which have made like $5 billion. So this might have been some sort of a passion project of Vin Diesel's. I don't know, but glad it got made because this was a fun one to watch.
All right, well, let's get into it. The Google information is thus: Find Me Guilty, 2006 drama, docudrama, 2 hours and 5 minutes, and it feels every bit of that, actually. 7.1 on the IMDb, 61% Rotten Tomatoes, 65% Metacritic, yet 92% of Google users love it. So the description is: imprisoned on a drug charge, mobster Jack DiNorsio, played by Vin Diesel, refuses to testify against his former associates in the Lucchese crime family. When an ambitious prosecutor brings him back to court, he decides to defend himself. Initially regarded with disbelief, his forceful presence and knowledge of the law turn the tide of the trial. Released February 16, 2006. Director is Sidney Lumet, and the box office was an abysmal $2.6 million on, I believe, was a $10 to $13 million budget. So it got kind of shithouse in the box office. But the reviews were fairly decent, fairly kind to it, but it's also a movie that is hard to find these days. I found a used copy on Amazon, and as I look at Amazon right now, there's a new version, or a new copy, that's $40. So it's not super easy to get. So we usually recommend that people watch the movie and then listen to our show because we do spoilers all the time. That might be a little bit difficult in this case, but do enjoy listening to the show. Realize we're going to spoil it, and if you do get a chance, try to track it down and give this movie a watch. So your take on all that Google information and my comments, Robert?
First of all, I believe it's pronounced Lucchese, and I don't say it was necessarily his language or his knowledge of the law. I think he's better with people, and he was more of an entertainer, and he kind of won over the jury. He maybe did a few decent lawyerly things during the trial, but I wouldn't say it was like some sort of masterstroke, brilliant lawyerly move that won the day. He did a fairly decent job, I thought, in his cross-examination of witnesses, pointing holes in their statements and that sort of thing, or at least casting some sort of doubt. I think was his best thing, but overall, I think he did an okay job, but it was more about winning the jury, and I think the movie kind of played off that a lot. I mean, this is a really long trial. It's like a 600-plus day trial, and you either got to like, as a jury member, at a certain point, I think all the information kind of bleeds together, and either you got to like these guys or you got to hate these guys, and that plays a lot into your decision about whether or not you want to find them guilty or punish them for whatever. But again, we're not given, all the information. Of course not. There's no way you could watch reams. They're just obviously picking and choosing very, very select bits to share with us, the audience, in this movie.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, because some of the dialogue in the film is actually lifted directly from the transcripts of the trial, and so that was kind of the basis for the story and the dialogue in this film. And it was primarily just courthouse with the occasional scene in his prison. And it's a very limited number of sets. They tried to make it be dramatic and funny at the same time. So I did find some humor in this. But let's get into a bit of an overarching narrative. Robert, just give us a breakdown on the story, and then I want to ask you some specific questions related.
Okay, so this is a movie about the biggest RICO trial of all time, where the U.S. government, over a period of many, many years, compiled enough evidence, so they believe, to file charges under, this RICO Act, which is, RICO is essentially, I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's essentially a conspiracy law where if you're friends with somebody, or if you're seen associating or working with somebody who also commits a crime, then you're guilty for that same crime. Now, I would love to get involved. We could talk about this that's a completely bullshit law. The idea that just because you know somebody, you are somehow guilty of the same things that they do, that the fact that is, in their minds, any sort of form of justice is a joke. Now, I can understand from a governmental perspective, and I have zero sympathy for government, but from a governmental perspective, you're tasked with, you think government's legitimate, and you are tasked with, fighting the mob, which is essentially created by government. Not even essentially, it's directly created from government actions. The mob operates in the black market. Things that are deemed illegal, completely voluntary situations, transactions that are deemed illegal by the state. So they work in numbers. They don't always work voluntarily. So they'll also work like protection rackets. They'll work numbers rackets. They'll work prostitution. They'll work drugs. So drugs, prostitution, if those things were legal, the amount of crime, of course, would go way, way, way down. The amount of violence involved in those situations would go way, way down. But the mob does do some bad things. Now, they're also not allowed to take part if they have a dispute. So there will be a mob dispute, and they got to decide, they can't just go to the courts to get that taken care of, get that resolved. So what they usually do is they'll have a member, of their family and a representative of the family that they have a beef with. And then they'll have a third representative who serves as a mediator who will sit and kind of arbitrate and sort of mediate any kind of a discussion. It's their own way of keeping things businesslike and nonviolent because, as we've said many, many times, violence is expensive. And you want to avoid violence as much as possible to settle disputes because, first of all, it's super risky. You could get killed, you could get hurt, but also it's a disruption on normal business, and you'd rather be making money than spending money. So there's an incentive to keep things civil, but they're not allowed to use the courts because they operate in, quote, illegal activity. So the movie kind of picks up with Jackie DiNorcio in the Lucchese family, and they're basically trying to establish that the Lucchese family is a big crime family, and that if they can find one of them guilty, and they basically pin their hopes on the mob boss, Lucchese mob boss, and I forget his name. Nick. But if you find one of them guilty, and there's like 50-some defendants, and each one has like a lawyer, so you can imagine the length. And of course, it took like 2 years to do this, but of course, that's what they want to do, but because they want to bust up the entire family.
All right, before you move on, I want to interject just two things. One, RICO is the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, and we can get into that a little bit further into the show and what a sham that is. But also your discussion about violence being mitigated in these dispute resolution methods. I think that a lot of the average Joe thought of the mafia is violence from media, from mob movies and TV shows. It's like the old myth of the Wild West. It's actually far less violent than as depicted in cowboy westerns and things like that. Now, certainly there are instances where the mafia is violent and things don't get resolved in a cordial manner, but I think that it's definitely blown out in proportion to the reality, and that's what the government uses in this case to try to paint these guys as pure evil gangsters, when sure they're doing quote-unquote illegal things, and there's a great moment or two where there's absolute projection, where the prosecutor is listing off all these terrible things that they do as part of the government, but then saying that it's really evil for these private citizens to do that very thing. So anyway, we'll get into that a little bit. I just want to interject the RICO thing and talk a little bit about the violence that is probably overblown due to media and culture. But continue on, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the government has, well, first of all, we're talking about the government that, first of all, created the mob, and then B, denied that they existed. Like during the 40s and the 50s, it was like J. Edgar Hoover was like, no, there's no such thing as the mob. Okay, whatever. And then they go along, and then, 50 years later, they're like, yeah, these guys are terrible, and they're the worst thing ever. And, oh, by the way, they just do exactly the same thing that we do. Because, yeah, they make things more expensive. They kill people from time to time.
Oh yeah, I've got a quote right here. It's this group of leeches that suck money out of every enterprise, legitimate or illegitimate, to support their extravagant lifestyles. Total projection. And he says it's a crime against all of America, which isn't really a thing. Only individuals exist. America is not and cannot be a victim. There's really no victim in any of these charges that I was aware of.
Right. No, they didn't. They didn't bring forth any victims. All they did was have like federal witnesses, like FBI informants and undercover cops, come together and be like, yeah, those are the guys. We saw money. We saw drugs. Blah, blah, blah. But there was never anybody that came out and said, you killed my sister or whatever.
Yeah, if anything, the biggest victim was the Vin Diesel character. He had been shot 4 times by his cousin. And then...
Yeah, that's how the movie starts. Yeah, he starts off with his drug-addled cousin shooting him with a .22 pistol multiple times. And, there's a great line. As he's laying there in the hospital, after these 2 cops come in and they're like, did you see anything? Who shot you? And he's like, I had my eyes closed the whole time. And then they ask his daughter, and she's like, I had my eyes closed the whole time. And then Jackie's like, if I had my head cut off and I've like been torn apart and gutted and cut to pieces, you don't call the cops. You call this other guy. Oh, that's just great. Because these guys are, they see the government as a pack of crooks.
A competition.
Shocker. It's competition. Absolutely. It's really one mob, fighting another mob, and one mob is vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the other mob. But the big mob has these set of rules that they make up and that supposedly people are supposed to play by. So.
Yeah, and I really like Jackie's loyalty. And he is no rat. He's a live and let live type of guy. Don't call the cops. And he loves his family and friends. And he keeps repeating that to them, and almost to the point of annoyance to many of them and to me as a viewer, as an audience member. But I think that he really did believe that the family bond was much stronger, and that he was kind of allowing for a lot of the struggles that like his cousin was having. He thought that he'd come through it because of that love that he had for him. It was a little sappy, that part, for me, but...
Well, you got to have a little bit of an emotional heart to a movie, so I think they probably focused on that a little bit. Now, Jackie, he does say at one point, I've read the RICO Act, and I think it applies more to those guys in Washington than it does to me and my friends. And could you give us again exactly what the word RICO stands for?
Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act.
Yeah, Racketeering and Corrupt Organizations Act. I mean, it sure sounds like the government. So, I mean, it's nothing but a criminal conspiracy. You get 2 people in a room, plan to commit a crime, and that's a conspiracy. I mean, what is the government if not creating laws that are criminal in nature?
Well, here's a summary. Under RICO...
And even committing felonies according to their own laws. I mean, just, a couple days ago, Trump bombed Syria, even though that's supposedly illegal. Even, the president's supposed to go to the Congress to ask for permission to declare war and do that sort of thing. But they don't. They just kill people. Anyway, go ahead, Daniel.
All right, so here's a list of the racketeering activity that are outlined under the RICO law. Any violation of state statutes against gambling, murder, kidnapping, extortion, arson, robbery, bribery, dealing in obscene matter, or dealing in a controlled substance or a listed chemical as defined by the Controlled Substances Act. Any act of bribery, counterfeiting, theft, embezzlement, fraud, dealing in obscene matter, obstruction of justice, slavery, racketeering, gambling, money laundering, commission of murder for hire, and many other offenses covered under the Federal Criminal Code, Title 18, embezzlement of union funds, how convenient, bankruptcy fraud or securities fraud, drug trafficking, long-term and elaborate drug networks can also be prosecuted using the continuing criminal enterprise statute, criminal copyright infringement, money laundering and related offenses, bringing in, aiding, or assisting aliens in illegally entering the country only if the action was for financial gain, and finally, acts of terrorism.
Well, you can prosecute Antifa under the RICO Act, and every black bloc member Antifa.
You could go after the guy who loaded this up to YouTube.
Yeah, pretty much anything.
Apparently, you can assist aliens in illegal entering the country as a non-profit.
Well, that's every sanctuary city.
Yep. Though you could argue that they want to bring people in to get more funding, right?
technically you could say that they vote Democratic, which is essentially voting to increase the size of the government, which would increase your funding. Yeah, but
Well,
you're
it
not
also gives
technically
them
profiting.
But it gives them the, we've got 10,000 people we need to service. We need a bigger budget and more staff.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But you're just doing your job as a government bureaucrat. You're not technically profiting.
Yeah, you got to
Even
grow
if you
your fiefdom.
That's right, baby. It's the name of the game, power, baby. Because, you got to fix the world with your central controlled planning.
You got to be corrupt, absolutely.
Yeah, baby.
All right, so under RICO, a person who has committed at least 2 acts of racketeering activity, drawn from a list of 35 crimes, 27 federal and 8 state crimes, within a 10-year period can be charged with racketeering if such acts are related in one of 4 specified ways to an enterprise. Those found guilty of racketeering can be fined up to $25,000 and sentenced up to 20 years in prison per racketeering count. In addition, the racketeer must forfeit all ill-gotten gains and interest in any business gained through a pattern of racketeering activity. In many cases, the threat of a RICO indictment can force defendants to plead guilty to lesser charges, in part because the seizure of assets would make it difficult to pay a defense attorney. And despite its harsh provisions, a RICO-related charge is considered easy to prove in court, as it focuses on patterns of behavior as opposed to criminal acts. So it totally throws out the entire justice common law tradition.
Right.
Of having a victim, of having an individual who is charged with a crime, who is able to meet his accuser, defend himself from the allegations. It entirely sidesteps that. And I believe it was because they were finding it so difficult, the government, to prosecute people for these alleged crimes. And so they wanted to find an easy way to make it, to pad their stats, essentially, to get political gains. In the pre-show, you were talking about that a little bit, about how prosecutors have every incentive to overcharge and then get people to bust down the charges, to plead to lesser charges to get their numbers stacked. And I think that is a perverse incentive. It's a political incentive. It's a bureaucratic incentive, and it's a very dangerous thing to introduce into any measure of justice.
Absolutely. No, it's a sick perversion of justice. So the idea that, you're, just some guy who runs errands for somebody who commits murders, and now you're being prosecuted for murder. It's disgusting. I mean, there are social norms that deal with this sort of thing. I mean, if you have, you're making these social contacts and you're known, your reputation is as that you work for these criminals, your reputation will suffer. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
Well, I want to introduce Tyrion Lannister for the defense.
Sure, do it.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to see Peter Dinklage in this one before the Game of Thrones action, and he was a very astute defense attorney representing one of the 20 accused mobsters, gangsters, and he kind of helped out the Vin Diesel character a little bit, helped coach him through some of his rougher edges. But his opening statement, he read the Latin that was on the judge's lectern, or whatever you call it, like his bench, and it was, let justice be done though the heavens may fall. And I thought that was a really apropos thing, because it flies in the face of what RICO does. RICO is anti-justice. And what this saying is getting at, the heart of it, is that you seek justice no matter what the inventions of man are. The contrivances of man, whatever they've built up around it, if it's not just, you can't pursue it, or not. I don't want to use the term too much, but if you can't justly do the thing that needs to be done, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Right, which is why our jury nullification comes in, or just hung juries and finding people not guilty of, regardless of the evidence. Sometimes, if there's no victim, there's no crime, and that needs to be far more done, far more widespread, because I believe at the beginning of trials, like, judges warn anybody about talking about jury nullification in any kind of deliberations, and if you do, you can get kicked off the jury and that sort of thing. Yeah,
they say you must follow my instructions to the letter, and if the law has been broken, you must find, that he's guilty.
Right.
You're not measuring the veracity of the law itself, which is also counter to the spirit of the justice system as conceived.
Right. I forget the quotes, but there are quotes about, it's your duty to fight unjust laws or something like that. It's the duty of good men to oppose evil or something like that. I don't know. I'm butchering all kinds of things here tonight. But Let me ask you, though, I thought that they were clearly guilty of something, but the government with this horseshit RICO law wasn't the right way to do it. If you got somebody who's guilty of a murder, you go and you prosecute the guy for murder. You don't prosecute these 55 people for whatever, all this one umbrella thing. Now, I thought it made sense, and the Jackie character got a lot of flack. The main character got a lot of flack for wanting to represent himself, because you find one person guilty of one thing, and you got to find them all guilty, is essentially the RICO law. Well, that's what they were saying in the movie. And so everybody was really angry with Jackie for, representing himself, but the Dinklage character actually thought he did a really good job. And he was, shown to do a fairly good job throughout. There was one point in the movie where I thought he was out of line, where he was essentially arguing that this FBI guy shouldn't have bought alcohol for his alcoholic brother. I mean, sure, it's probably a responsible thing to not buy alcohol for an alcoholic brother, but if your brother dies from alcoholism and some FBI guy bought him some alcohol one time, that guy's not responsible for your brother's death. You made a tiniest little contribution to maybe a little bit enabling the guy, but ultimately the alcoholic is responsible for his own death if he's killing himself from alcohol. I'm sorry.
Right, though the FBI agent was clearly using him and using that weakness to achieve an end. So it was
I'm not
certainly
saying,
slimy.
Right. It was definitely slimy and underhanded, for sure. But he's not responsible for the guy's death of alcoholism. But yeah, I mean, he's a government agent. Of course, he's a tool. Right.
Now, you were talking about how Jackie handled, in general, things very well, other than that situation. And I think you're right. He was a bit of a character, and they made reference to, him having a late-night talk show when he was all done with this. And he got the jury laughing and liking him, and they had that saying, a laughing jury ain't a hanging jury, because the prosecutors want to paint, the government, the prosecution, wants to paint these people as liars, thieves, murderers, arsonists, killers, drug runners, prostitution ring runners, all these terrible, terrible things. But Jackie's defense was essentially, we're just family guys. We know each other. We knew each other since we were kids. We've got wives. We've got kids. We do hundreds of interactions with various people in the community every day. And all the government can do is bring up 3 or 4 junkies and, unstable individuals to make these allegations against us that aren't even like legitimate crimes or charges. And I liked how he also took the affirmative defense when they were talking about him doing coke, and he said, yeah, I don't deny it,
Yeah, I thought that was great. He's like, yeah, I'll never deny it. I love coke. He said it right in front of everybody. He's like, yeah, I love coke. I do it all the time. Which, yeah, don't deny it. Run out in front of it. Be like, yeah, I love drugs. What? It's not illegal to love drugs.
Well, the
That's
loving
not what
isn't
I'm on trial for.
Right, yes.
Well,
yeah, he wasn't copying to that. It wasn't a charge, right? That wasn't one of his
right.
charges. So, yeah, he
Right.
got away with being able to say that.
So do you think that they should have found them guilty? Not from
no.
our perspective.
No, because most of the charges were bullshit. I mean, they didn't, list them all out entirely, but they didn't bring up one real victim. The story that he had with, I want to say the guy's name was Juarez or something like that. We said, no, you tell the story to the jury. He's like, okay, so Jackie's doing this deal, and there's 7 guys, and he's got a 6-shot revolver, and the guys say to him, well, we're not going to give you the money because you've only got 6 shots. There's 7 of us. So Jackie says, well, I'll shoot 6 of you and strangle the 7th. And then they walked out of there with the money. And he's essentially copying to a crime, right? But not any of the crimes that he was particularly charged with in this event. So I do think that there was some underhanded dealings that they were involved in, but for what they were on trial for, and for, like you said, they wouldn't even be a thing if it weren't for an even bigger mafia outlawing certain things and incentivizing somebody to provide that service in a black market and undermarket area that is rife with, more risks and dangers involved.
Right. I mean, look at what he's reduced to. I mean, they're reduced to doing coke deals in hotel rooms, with people you just met or, barely kind of know, and you got to kind of trust them or not trust them. And it's a sketchy system, and you're putting yourself at risk, like you said, with, 7 guys in there and you got a 6-shot revolver. It's a risky business, and it attracts, people that are kind of attracted to that sort of lifestyle. But I'm sure that they would be just as happy, not necessarily just as happy maybe for these kind of people, but this, if this was legal, you'd walk into the local pharmacy and order up a gram of coke or whatever, and it would be way, way cheaper, and it would be way, way safer, and the quality would be a lot higher, and maybe there would be different brands you could buy, and in different consistencies or different flavors. I don't know.
Like
Whatever.
with weed, it's almost 420, and you get the Johnny Chimpo flavor.
Sure, you can get the Frankenstein. You get all kinds of different ones. You can get the Frankenberry actually over here. I don't know. You got Frankenberry over there?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Not my bag,
Well, the
baby.
point is, you can get all kinds of different sizes and different flavors and different strains, and that's the market working. And that's with it being taxed out the wazoo. That's with $1 million licensing fee and 51% producer's tax and then 34% sales tax, like 85% tax.
And then they're taxed on the profits.
So, yeah, and then they're taxed on the profit on the back end. So it's...
Talk about a protection racket.
Talk about a protection racket. Here it's legal, and here we're going to take 85% of this market.
Yeah, I mean,
For doing what?
It totally goes into the projection, the tirade about things costing more because of these guys over here. Well, look at yourselves in the mirror. You just made weed like 10 times more expensive. Yeah, we went to the store with my aunt, and we bought some edibles. And she bought this bag that had like 10 candies in it, 10 candies, and it was like $45. And I mentioned the tax rate, and I'm like, that bag should have cost like $5. She just made her sad. It just made her sad. Yeah, so like we said, not only are they making things cost more, but they fucking kill people from time to time. Even more than time to time with the government. I mean, we're talking how many millions of dead and displaced and cholera out of control in the Middle East? How many hundreds of millions of dead in the 20th century alone? I mean, the numbers are astronomical. And the mafia, they'll kill each other from time to time because they have no other form of dispute resolution other than what we already talked about. But, yeah, there's not it's an anarchic system. And where's the big violence coming out of the mafia? Like we said, it's like the Wild Wild West. It's played up for the cameras. It's played up for the movies. But it's really rare because people are people. Violence is expensive. It's risky. It's dangerous. And it's contrary to making a profit in business. So it's, anyway. Yeah, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse right now. This is like obvious shit. We're being a dead horse. We're going to chop its head off, and we're going to put it in your bed because you didn't pay up. Right. So, speaking of the Godfather and whatnot, I had something interesting to talk about, and now I totally forgot. So we did the projection thing. So the Jackie's performance and Tyrion Lannister's performance, especially catching that one guy with the power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Claiming to be a college professor in philosophy, misattributing the quote to Machiavelli instead of Lord Acton, which was... crazy dumb. And it's absolutely true. Power does corrupt, and absolute power does corrupt, absolutely. The prosecution finally says, okay, we want to offer them a plea deal now because we're at risk of losing. And it's a different amount of years for each of I think there are 20 or so accused, and different people were going to get different amounts for sentencing in this deal. And Jackie convinces them all to say fuck them, and they all vote no unanimously. And I thought that was pretty great. Yeah, I agree. That was a strong moment in the film where they're like, hey, you can rat out your friends and cop to a plea deal and say that you're guilty and your other friends are guilty, or you can just say no. And there's a scene where Jackie is talking to the court, and the judge threatens to find him in contempt for the court. And he says, I got nothing but contempt for this court. And I just had to be like, yeah, by what right does this asshole claim to have authority over you, claim to have authority to essentially decide your fate, to essentially, decide whether you live or die or whether you spend the rest of your life in a cage or not. Right, and the prosecutor, he smelled blood in the water at that. He went up to the judge and said, he undermines the authority of your court, Your Honor. Yeah, and then even the Dinklage character was like, yeah, judges don't like it when you disrespect their court. And so then he meekly had his tail between his legs, and he was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect you. It's like, son of a bitch, I wish you had just stuck to your guns. That's like the old apologizing for being right. Oh, yeah, never apologize. I mean, if you're right, don't ever apologize. But I think Lannister, he said that's the one thing that pisses off a judge the most is making a mockery of the proceedings. Right, because, their whole world is
situated around the legitimacy of the proceedings.
Right, the religious spectacle and
yeah, with the robes and the hammer.
Right, the ceremony and the procedures
flag.
and all that stuff. Yeah, it's great.
Might as well have incense and like little music and stuff too. I mean, why not?
Crystal
and everybody
ball.
has to stand up and like bow before him and crap. It's disgusting.
Yeah, that's another thing that bothered me. Was when Jackie first addressed the judge. The judge was like, "No, you have to stand up to come talk to me."
Yeah, it's like we're just two people here, buddy. You're not better than me. It's gross, but these are what the makeshift religion rules that this state has come up with. Speaking of the lack of self-awareness in the movie, there's the scene that I particularly enjoy the most, and we've mentioned it here a little bit. But there's a scene where the prosecutor is talking to his team, and they're in his office, and one of his helpers says that one of the jurors finds Jackie cute. And then the prosecutor launches into this tirade about these people are so stupid. All these mafia people do is make everything more expensive because all the goods that come in through the port, they take a cut, blah, 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 and plus they kill people. Now, that was obviously not part of the trial transcript. So this is an invention by the writer. Now, do you think that this is the writer's voice? And do you think the writer was aware of the irony? Was this a point he was trying to make? Because it came across loud and clear to me that this is some tone-deaf guy who doesn't own a mirror saying this crap. But I'm also perfect audience member to see that irony. So do you think that was intentional? Do you think that's the writer's voice coming through? Or do you think that was just an accident and that would be something that the prosecutor would say?
It felt like you were going to say something else. Another moment. It's really hard to know because it could go either way for sure. I think that we're in tune to see these things in film that other people might not see, and I just said not see.
That was the second part of my question was what percentage of the audience do you think found that ironic? That's the line ironic from that guy.
Right, but it does make sense that everyone thinks they're a white hat, right? So the prosecutor thinks that he's doing the right thing, the correct job, and he's upset that he's not getting these guys to roll over for him, and that he's losing the jury, and he seems to more respect his authority than the intention of the apparatus. Like he's deriding the jury, even though they're an important part of this entire facade, right? This whole justice system, criminal trial.
Yeah, the whole ceremony really depends on them.
Right, this whole theater.
Uh-huh.
Yet he doesn't respect them.
Right, no, he thinks they're idiots.
Yeah, but then later he goes on about how there's a collective power that emerges in his closing statement, where he's talking about the court proceedings and the process of determining guilt or innocence, and that I don't know. It was almost like saying that we're all bound together in this human family, and it's only collectively that we can solve our problems. Did you get any vibe
Probably.
of that?
I got a vibe of that. I don't remember the exact quote of what you're talking about. I remember the scene where he's giving his final comments, his closing argument. But his whole life and worldview revolves around the legitimacy of this theater.
Right, and the social contract. And the last part of his statement was, these guys broke the law for decades with utter disregard for the law, and they deserve to be punished by society for these crimes. Right.
That is his view. That is his worldview, that these people were thumbing their noses at the law for all this time, and that even if this case falls apart, and even if he didn't do a good job proving anything, you need to find them guilty because clearly, look at them. Look at them. They're a bunch of mobsters, and they're guilty of something, even if we did a shit show job here. So, yeah, that was kind of my vibe of what I got from that guy. And, in the real life, they found him innocent.
Yeah, he reminded me of the Eric character from Billy Madison.
Remind me who the Eric character was?
He was the guy competing with Billy to become the next president of Madison Hotels.
Oh, yeah. It's a very similar actor.
With a little Weasley laugh.
Temperament. Yeah, a little Weasley temperament, too. Like, why don't they hate them? Like, I'm telling them they should hate them.
Business ethics.
Yeah, if I were on that jury and that actor was playing, the real person and whatnot, I would have hated him. So I would have taken everything he said with a grain of salt. I don't know if the real-life prosecutor was that unlikable. But they also had, this also took place, I guess, in Giuliani's district? Because that's how it begins. But then he never shows up. Obviously, they don't have, an actor playing as Giuliani. But I mean, if you're going to ask me my opinion on that, dirtbag, I probably would have just said, innocent, day one, and walked out.
Yeah, if I recall, I think that's where he made his name, was with not this trial, but other anti-poverty.
Mafia stuff.
Anti-mafia, yeah, not anti-poverty. And that's kind of where he first got into the spotlight. And what was he, the mayor of New York when 9/11 happened? And so that was the other thing that really, really hitched his wagon too.
Yeah, he made his bones on mob trials in the 90s as like the head prosecutor in New York.
Right, trying to clean up
attorney
the
or something
city,
like that.
law and order type. And then
off that he had a successful mayor bid, and then stood next to George Bush. What a stud!
Right, and put that into a presidential bid until Ron Paul shut his ass down.
Until Ron Paul told him to sit down and take your toys and go home, boy. Like a boss.
Man, that was good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to ask you, the amount of effort that went into prosecuting these guys, the 76 counts in the indictment, the 400-plus exhibits, the 600-plus days, and they even show it like wearing out the people accused. Like one of the guys collapses, and then they bring in his hospital bed, and even the prosecution are like, worn out from all of this. They're not getting any sleep. They're frustrated by this. People are on the jury for 2 years, not doing their lives, not doing their productive employment, creating value for others. I mean, this whole thing just seems like this huge fucking waste of time, resources, effort, everything. Did you get that?
The government doesn't make things more expensive, Daniel.
Not to mention, they fucking kill people from time to time.
I mean, yeah, we don't get the overall, even just the cost in the money spent to prosecute the case. We don't even get that. But you're right. There's so many other intangibles that increase the cost like exponentially of all the time people are just sitting around not doing productive work. You're right. So who knows what the actual cost is to the world and everybody else. So it's terrible. The government spends, hundreds of millions of dollars probably prosecuting this case. How many millions of dollars prosecuting other cases? Billions, sorry.
Yeah, and had the government won their case, it would have been even worse, because then they had to incarcerate all these guys and pay for that.
Yeah, and then spend millions of dollars to put them in behind bars. Yeah, it's a fucked up system that makes no goddamn sense, but that's what you get when you have a government monopoly and they don't actually have to compete to lower costs.
All right, so before we wind this down, because we're approaching an hour here, I wanted to bring up the turn with the cousin, because he's their star witness for the government, and this is well into the trial, and they're he's the clincher, right? He's the one who's going to name the names and point the fingers and be able to, eyewitness testimony say that these are the guys who did X, Y, and Z, and seal the deal on this case. So the thing that stood out to me was that I think it's the Peter Dinklage character, Tyrion Lannister. He has this board up, and he's calling off all these names of heavy drugs and establishing that this star witness at the time was a frequent user of all of these mind-altering substances, including heroin and meth and cocaine and Quaaludes and Valiums and all these things, this list of 20 items. Totally destroying any credibility this guy has in the eyes of the jury, for sure.
Plus, doesn't Vin Diesel get on and basically point out that the only reason he turned state's evidence is so they could keep hooking him up with drugs?
Yes, and that was the turn I was talking about.
Okay.
So Vin Diesel, trying to do the right thing by his cousin out of love for him, stops enabling him.
Right.
This upsets his cousin so much that he, probably not in a very good state of mind, thinks that Jackie needs to be killed because he's given money out to everyone else, he's given jobs to everyone else, he's helping out everyone else but me. But what he failed to realize is that Jackie was helping him out by, A, letting him live with him. That's enabling him enough. But then not giving him any additional money with which he's just going to shoot into his arm.
Right. Yeah, that's the junkie mentality. They can't see the forest for the trees.
Right, and so the government became his pimp.
Right. So, he'll say whatever they want. So that just destroys his credibility, like you said.
Right, and it totally shows the, all the projection that was happening earlier, where the prosecutor was talking about all these evil things, but it's really the government that is doing them.
Uh-huh.
Well, there's your prime example. Their star witness is their junkie that they are pimping out to get their conviction, or think they're going to get their conviction from him. Right.
So they just revealed their hand that, we're slime balls. We'll feed a junkie drugs just to try and get this conviction. I think that would probably come through to the jury, hopefully, if they're not too brains turns to mush from 2 years of blathering on. And just imagine sitting down for 8 hours a day, listening to this crap over and over again. I don't know if I could do it. It'd be brutal.
Right, and this whole structure is just crazy. I remember in my firearms training that the instructor was saying that, if you are ever involved in a self-defense shooting, the prosecution and the police are going to lie to you and get you to say something that they're going to turn against you and try to paint you as this evil monster who has a gun because you're looking for trouble and you think you're Rambo and that you want to use violence to solve your problems. They're going to use all of these worst possible things, and you saw that in this movie where they tried to paint them as evil, murdering, arsonist, prostitution, gangster types instead of just people who happen to be maybe doing some somewhat illicit things that probably most of them shouldn't be illegal anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, their list of crimes would go way down. I mean, besides, the illegal stuff, if I could collect my thoughts here on this, say you make all these vices legal tomorrow, their list of crimes obviously would instantly go down because all of a sudden the things that they're doing are now legal.
Well, you have a prime example in alcohol prohibition. That was the rise of this gangster mentality. And, one day alcohol is fine, the next day it's not. And then, 16 years later or whatever it was, it reversed. I mean, did that change the morality of it?
Right. But, what would their list of crimes be once all that stuff is made legal? Maybe extortion, or would they make enough money that they wouldn't even feel the need to extort anybody? I don't know. But clearly you can't trust the government, and I think that came through in the movie. I wonder though, this movie seemed like they've got mafia as the protagonists, as the hero of the story. Now, we're somewhat used to that in that there have been mafia movies like The Godfather and The Sopranos, and there are somewhat, sort of redeemable characters in those movies and entertainment. But you could also, I'm sure you could also watch The Sopranos and say, there isn't a single character on here that I like. They're all bad people. But in this movie, they're very much portrayed as the heroes, and the government is portrayed as the villain. And I can see why this movie probably didn't get a wide release. But it seemed to be an intentional thing on the filmmaker's part, because they could have told the story from another perspective, from the prosecutor's perspective, and made these guys out to be villains, and this massive injustice happened, that they were found innocent due to, who knows what, a stupid jury or jury tampering or whatever, cockamamie, whatever. But do you think, are you okay with this? Are you okay, do you feel good thinking that, I can cheer on these mafia guys being the heroes?
Well, I found the movie to be entertaining and have a libertarian streak within it, like you were saying, but I think it's a case of maybe we're picking up something that might not intentionally be there. That happens from time to time. Think of Firefly. It's made by this uber leftist, and it's this libertarian space cowboy fantasy, which is, kind of an inadvertent, it's like scoring a goal when you just intended to, kick the ball away randomly.
Right. Yeah, it might not be intentional, but it seemed to be fairly intentional that they really kind of vilified the prosecutor. He was this kind of dickbag, smarmy guy, and I'm sure that came across as they were doing the research. The writer were doing the research for the movie, having to listen to all this material to cull, the choicest bits out for the story. But it seemed to be very anti-government, anti-authority. I thought it had a great message, even though the heroes were not necessarily good people. They were up against worse people. And so I found myself cheering for them. Absolutely. I wanted them to be found innocent, even though they're probably guilty of any number of crimes, real aggression, murders, and whatever else.
Yes, sir. Well, if you want to just continue on that thought and give us your final summary and rating, sir.
Okay. Well, this movie probably should have made a little bit more money than it did. It probably didn't have a big budget to market it, and it probably didn't find its audience, obviously. But I would give this movie, I don't know if it's the best movie, but if you have an interest in this sort of thing, I would recommend it. I would say that this is about a 7.4 to 7, maybe a 7.6. I really enjoyed it. I know Dan said that it felt long, and it does kind of drag a little bit probably in the middle, because it is essentially just a whole bunch of courtroom scenes and the people just talking. So if you're going to be bored by that, then sorry, that's what it is. But I found the Vin Diesel character to be a charming guy. He wasn't the smartest guy in the world, but he had a nice personality, a fun personality, and I really enjoyed his loyalty. His loyalty was fantastic. His loyalty to his family, to the people that he loved and he cared about. I think everybody can take something positive from that. So I was rooting for the guy. I was cheering for the guy, even though I didn't necessarily think he was the best guy. And I did enjoy this movie. 7.6. Daniel?
All right, 7.6, not too bad at all. I'm glad that you recommended this movie, and I'm also glad that I was able to find it as used on Amazon, like I was saying earlier, because a new copy is about $40 right now. So if you're on the lookout for it, maybe hold out for a used one or something like that. I think there might even be a semi-pirated version on YouTube where, you know how sometimes they'll zoom in really far and darken it up or do something weird to make it not get caught by the automated like algorithms that identify quote-unquote copyrighted material.
Yeah, they'll either pitch it up or down a little bit and then, crop it or zoom it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys might be able to find it there, and that's probably good enough. I mean, it's not like you're watching this for the spectacle. You know, it's not like a heavy, graphics-intensive type immersive movie-going experience. But it is, it does feel very long. But if you're into the mobster, gangster type stuff and court proceedings and things like that, it can be very entertaining. And he is a charming guy. It's Vin Diesel kind of flexing his chops a little bit. He's more known as like an action star and as being bald and kind of buff. And in this, he's got hair and he's kind of dopey. And he doesn't seem all that big. To me in this one, I mean, there's a scene where he gets beat up by a couple of guards and he, tries to fight back a little bit, but then they beat him to a pulp. And even to the cops or even to the prison guards, when they're saying, what are you going to tell the judge when they see you all beat up? He says, I fell down the stairs. So his loyalty wasn't just to his family. It was like part of his code of honor. He's not going to rat on anybody for any reason whatsoever.
He's got a principle. I liked it. He's not going to rat. That was really something anybody could really get behind.
Right. I'm a big fan of principle, so that helps bring this up. I'm going to give it a 7. It's not the greatest movie ever, but it certainly is worth watching, and if you are of a libertarian persuasion, I think that you'll find some subtle nods. It's sometimes nice to see the villains projecting their evil upon others, but they're far more guilty of those very evils that they're talking about, yet they don't seem to be able to see it. So that's very interesting. And one final note I wanted to mention, we talked about culture and gangster movies and how they're kind of based on, entertaining you with the violence that's going on. Yet they all seem to have a lot of older guys in them, right? Old mafia guys, like even The Sopranos, a lot of the main characters are old guys. Well, if it was so violent, how'd they get to be old?
That's a good point. Yeah, there's like a lot of retired guys in this movie too. And there's one guy, like you said, there's a guy that has a heart attack. And he's like in a bed for the rest of the movie. And everybody else has got gray hair. There aren't any young guys in this movie that are being prosecuted.
Yeah, so I mean, even within the media, movie and culture, even that doesn't jive within its own self, right? So anyway, just something I thought of at the last moment here.
Good point.
Speaking of last moment, these are the last moments of this episode of The Last Nighters on Find Me Guilty, the Vin Diesel movie. It's a very fun movie, so do check it out if you do get the chance. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/16. And I'm going to say goodnight from last night. And continuing the transmission on the Actual Anarchy podcast, we have just a few more minutes. Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about, how they try to hive him off into his own trial because he's such a disruptive force in the RICO one.
They threatened to do that, right?
Right, which would have been, I think, kind of against the rules of the game, the rules of the engagement.
Yeah,
I would think you'd have
mid-trial,
to throw
I would think you would declare a mistrial and have to start over.
Right, and then do another whole waste of time and money and resources.
Yeah, and another couple of years. Booyah. Yeah, man. I thought it was a fun movie. I saw a bunch of, libertarian themes in there, especially any kind of movie that makes the government out to be the bad guys, which is what they are, kind of shows the government for what they are is a good thing, regardless of who, because usually you think of the mafia as the bad guys and the government as the good guys, and this kind of flips it on its head. So, good stuff. I mean, even though, clearly the mafia aren't good guys, but they'd be a lot better guys in a non-governmental system. Yeah.
It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about that with the Don't Waste Your Hate guys who are also from Jersey.
Yeah, and, seeing these things, I think, is just a matter of, you see the things that you take interest in, and everything else you kind of just blends in, right?
Yeah. Like if I was a big fashion person, I'd probably care about what they're wearing and whatnot, and go, oh, these look people look terrible. Oh, the pinky rings and whatever. But yeah, he's just like, who cares? I want to talk about the projection.
Right, because I mean, without some level of specialized knowledge or specific knowledge about a particular thing, it all looks like every other thing that's similar to it, and they all look roughly the same. So
I wonder. That's why I was trying to wonder what the average audience member would see in this movie. Would the same things kind of stick out to them or not? To me, I don't know. I think a lot of these lines would have maybe just kind of passed by, but they really stood out to me as being significant, and it seemed to me like the writers were aware of it, but maybe they weren't. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what made it go shithouse in the box office. I mean, it had not a super wide release. I think it had 400 theaters or 500 theaters, and they made under $1,000 a theater in their opening weekend, which is pretty garbage.
Yeah.
And it went from release date to DVD in like 3 months, which, is fairly common now because they're competing with so many other media streaming services now.
Mm-hmm.
But 10 years ago, I mean, it would often be 6 or 10 months before you'd see the DVD release on something. They try to do it in time for like the holidays or something like that, but it seemed to be a much longer cycle. And this was like almost straight to DVD.
Yeah, it's not a good sign. Sure isn't. It means they've wrung every last dollar out of the theatrical release that they could, and it's time to move on and see what you can get on the home market. But yeah, this is a movie obviously didn't find its audience. It had plenty of big-name actors. I mean, this is pre-Game of Thrones Tyrion Lannister, so take it for what it is. Peter Dinklage, I think what Game of Thrones started in 2008, 2009?
Has it been that long? I thought they were on like season 6 now.
There are, but it hasn't been. I don't think it's been every year.
Okay.
Maybe it was 210. Maybe it's 210.
So a few years after this.
Anyway, it's a couple years after this. So anyway, good stuff.
I do want to mention that we are going to do our Boys Night Out episode this Tuesday with the guys from Don'tWasteYourHate.com. They run the Don't Waste Your Hate podcast that is also a member of the Libertarian Union. It's Invalid Beard and Tony Rockamora, and they do some really great work over there. They put us to shame, and hopefully they can lift our boats when they join us for that conversation where we're going to talk about this episode, this movie, and anything else that comes up. These boys are from New Jersey, and it should be a lot of fun. We really enjoy working with these guys. We
sure do. Yeah, those are some good guys. If you're not subscribing to Don't Waste Your Hate, they have some really interesting conversations over there. It's more of like a free-form discussion kind of a show, and they go down some interesting rabbit trails.
Yeah, and I think they just had Anthony Samaroff of the Scottish Liberty podcast on, and so that should be really good. And then they're also going to be joining us for the State of the Libertarian Union talk show, which will be on the last Sunday of the month, which I think, the 30th? So a lot of good stuff coming up with them, us collaborating with them. And I don't know, what else is going on, Robert? I think we should probably wind this one down. Maybe do a little bit of Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is something that is available for our Patreon supporters. Also, a bunch of pre-show is available. So you can find that at patreon.com/ReadRothbard and give us a little bit of donation money. Also, our Last Nighters YouTube channel. If you could give us a subscribe over there, I think we're at 65 or 66 now. If we get up to 100, we get the custom URL. So if you are a listener of this show and you want to support us non-monetarily, just click on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. That'll be a big benefit for us.
Yeah, thanks any way you can, supporting us and subscribing. Thanks much. And telling friends and leaving a review, all that stuff, and interact with us on the comments. It'd be great. Thanks a lot.
All right, well, thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the Actual Anarchy Podcast. This is episode 73. You can find the show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/73. So thank you for listening. I wish you good night, and we're going to get into some Kathleen Turner Overdrive. But peace out, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.